This is David Wiggins from George Mason University. I was elected to the National Academy of Kinesiology in 2007 with the number 483. And I'm talking this afternoon with Dr. James Morrow, who just retired from the University of North Texas. Jim was elected to the National Academy of Kinesiology in 1992 with the number 341. Jim, let's start out by, if you could talk about what you consider the highlights of your educational and professional career.
Well, I would suggest that the best thing that got me started was good mentoring, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. At some point, hopefully, I'll come back and mention again the undergraduate, but the best experiences I had as a graduate student were at the University of Colorado, where I was a student in the Lab of Educational Research. The directors of the lab at that time, Gene Glass and Ken Hopkins. And that was an experience that was second to none. I call myself a measurement person. I teach measurement and evaluation courses. My doctoral degree is actually research and evaluation methodology. I cannot imagine a better place to have been in the early and mid-1970s than the University of Colorado Lab of Educational Research. The experiences and the people that I met there were just outstanding. In the physical education department at that time, my advisor was Dale Mood. Dale is still my personal friend, my colleague. I speak to Dale probably to this day each month a couple of times. He's a wise man, but literally the foundation that I got from the University of Colorado was just, I can't speak highly enough of the people and the experiences that I gained there. I left the University of Colorado in 1976 upon graduation. I actually then took a one-year job at the University of Houston. I was replacing, if anyone could do that, Tony Jackson at the University of Tony was going on faculty development leave, also known as sabbatical. He actually came to the Dallas area and worked with Mike Pollock at that time. And he and Mike, at that period, over that year of 1976, they worked on the development of the Jackson and Pollock skinfold equations, which were very instrumental, influential, and have been ever since that time. So I went to Houston for 1 year. While Tony was going to be away for one semester, I was going to replace and teach his classes for 1 year. Well, that 1 year turned into 17 years. That was an amazing trip. I value the things that Tony and I worked on together, the things that he taught me. That was a great experience. In the mid-70s into the early 1980s, the whole concept of health-related fitness was being developed. The AFERD confusion, debate about performance testing and health-related fitness testing. Tony was intimately involved in that, along with the Katch brothers and Joe Seyfried and Harold Falls, Kieran Plowman, and all that group, all those people who are Academy members now. And so I was there as a young buck watching all that go on, and it was I got to play with the big fellows at that time. I stayed there at Houston then for 17 years, and then left there to assume the department chair at the University of North Texas. Did that in 1993, and then that's where I finally retired from. So it was 17 years at the University of Houston, then 23 years at the University of North Texas. While I was at North Texas, the colleague with whom I did the most work was Alan Jackson. Fortuitously, Alan was one of Tony's students. Alan was, when I was in Houston, when I first got there, he did not ever take any classes from me, but he and I knew each other and talked about things together because we had common interests in terms of the content area. And then when I got to North Texas, he and I did many things together. And again, I've been very fortunate in that oftentimes if you're, quote, the measurement person or the research methodology person on a faculty, often you're the only person there. Well, in both of my cases, U of H, I had Tony Jackson. When I was at North Texas, Alan Jackson. So that was good. I mean, I could talk with people who had common interests, and so as a result of that, I was very blessed, fortunate that I could work with them, and we did many, many things together. So in a nutshell, that's what I did. 40 years of teaching research methodology, measurement, and evaluation courses. Started at the University of Colorado in graduate school. And then
go ahead.
Then went to Houston and North Texas, and I had a good deal of fun. I won't say that I miss it a great deal. We have 2 young grandchildren. They're just as much fun as college students are.
You know, I'm curious, Jim. How did you find your way to the University of Colorado? If I'm not mistaken, am I right that you took your bachelor's degree from the University of West Florida?
Correct. I was an HPER major at the University of West Florida. Thank you for bringing me back there, David. My undergraduate advisor there, she's still alive, and if I called her today, she'd recognize my voice, and I love her. What I do today is in large part of what I learned from her as an undergraduate student at West Florida. West Florida at that time was it was one of these experiments where they had upper division, junior and senior, and graduate students only. Most of those have proven not to be successful. Florida at that time had a substantial community college program, junior college called in those days, and I had actually played junior college basketball, and so then from there I went to West Florida and met Dr. Pat Howe. She was a graduate of Texas Woman's University. West Florida, my wife and I met there. We've now been married for 45 years. We met there, and we were in the charter class. So it was a new university, it was new faculty, new students. And Dr. Howe, I took my first measurement class from her, and I just loved what she did. It was just, I thought, I want to be like that woman when I grow up. So, I learned a lot of things from her. It was a relatively small university then. Again, only upper division juniors and seniors at the time. I would guess we had maybe 3,500 students, maybe 4,000, I don't recall. But then subsequent to graduating from there, that's 1969, the military draft was still going on. The lottery did not kick in yet, so I, through a number of circumstances, enlisted in the Air Force. I became an Air Force medic. During that time, I spent almost my entire time stationed at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Literally the first day I got on base, when I got appointed there, I got there on a Sunday, and on Monday morning I was assigned to labor and delivery. So here I am, a medic, 22 years of age, and I'm working labor and delivery, which I know nothing about. During the next period of time, for about the next year, I assisted in about 300 births. It was a real rewarding experience. If you're going to work in a hospital, the best place to work is in labor and delivery, because for the most part, people are very happy there. But literally the first day I showed up on campus, I met a man who was my boss. He says, "Morrow, we need to get you in school." I said, "No, sir, Sergeant Hicks. I've been in school. I don't want to go to school again." That was on Monday. Wednesday night, I was enrolled in a class. What was then the University of Colorado in Boulder had an extension in Colorado Springs. Now the University of Colorado Springs is a standalone university. But I literally enrolled in a class on Wednesday night, and the next thing you know, I'm taking some classes, and some faculty are coming down from Boulder, and they're saying, "Hey, Morrow, did you ever think about enrolling in our master's program?" And I said, "Well, I know," and me under their arm, and I guess the person who led me along the best there was Art Dickinson. Art is retired faculty from the University of Colorado, and then via that I met Dale. And the next thing you know, I'm getting out of the Air Force and was offered the opportunity to be a graduate student in research at the University of Colorado and at Florida State. So Florida State was, I can't recall the gentleman's name who was there now. I can picture him. I went down and interviewed. They didn't offer me a TA, but Colorado did, and the rest is history. And not that I wouldn't experience at FSU, would have been back close to home, if you would. But the great part was the education and the experiences I got at Colorado, second to none. I got to those people and the academic experiences I had there. If I'm anything today, it's because of what those people did.
Fantastic. I'm also curious, Jim. You said that If I could ask, how, and you said you and your wife have been married for 45 years, and you also said you have a couple of grandchildren. How many children do you and your wife have?
We have two children. Both of them are living near us, not too far away, one about an hour one direction, one about an hour and a half the other direction. Our daughter was a school teacher until about 2 months ago. She taught school for, I think, 12 years, and she now calls herself professor because she just took a job at a community college. She's been doing some part-time things. So now she teaches at a community college locally here. Our son is an aerospace engineer. He graduated from Texas A&M. She graduated from Baylor University. They both have graduate degrees as well. So we're very pleased that they're doing well. Don't ask us for any money or anything else.
Very, very good. Do you have any special memories of the individuals who were inducted along with you in the National Academy of Kinesiology? You know, I looked through the list, the membership list for 1992, and it looks like a rather long list relative to some of the other years. You know, you were elected in at the same time as Jack Berriman, who I know quite well because of Jack's interest in sport history. But Priscilla Clarkson, people like Deb Phelps, Nancy Struna, Tim White, Harriet Williams, Craig Risberg. It's a Hall of Fame group, that's for sure. Bert Karen. So it's quite a list. Do you have any special memories of those folks or any stories about those folks that you'd like to tell?
I did the same thing as that you did, David. I printed off the list because I remembered two of them exactly. So I printed off the list. And I can think of a few things as I go through here. Obviously, Priscilla Clarkson passed away not too long ago, and she was very influential in our field. You know, president of ACSM from Amherst, and she was a wonderful person. I didn't know her real well, but I knew her largely through Patty Friedson at the University of Massachusetts. Deb Phelps and I have done a number of things together. Deb was really influential in one of the things that I think the Academy should receive additional recognition for, and that is the doctoral review that they do every 2 years now. That began when we attempted to be involved with the National Research Council. If you'll recall, they would evaluate doctoral programs, but kinesiology was not in part of that. So we went before the National Research Council. Let's see, who was there? Scott Kretschmer, myself, and Clark, Virginia Tech. What was the name of it? Oh, it escapes me. I can't remember what her name is right now. Take that off the tape, David. Right? Deb instrumental in doing all the pilot testing and early testing of the metrics that were going to be used and the strategies that were involved. And so I was involved with Deb on many of those kinds of things. Sharon Plowman was also inducted at the same time I was. Sharon and I have been on the FitnessGram Advisory Board for more than 30 years. So Sharon's probably the person that I know the best from the who were my peers or inducted at the same time. Sharon retired recently, and she's now in Virginia. Sharon and I we're the only two remaining original members on the FitnessGram Advisory Board. And Sharon is a very influential person, and I love Sharon a great deal. Tim White he's a chancellor at the CSU system, California State University system. He moved into administration. I can't remember. Tim was either out of Berkeley in Michigan.
Tim took his PhD, I believe, from the University of California, Berkeley.
And then I think he went to work with either Vic Hatch at Michigan, I think, and then he got into administration, and he's moved right up to a couple of different presidential roles, I think, and is now as the chancellor. It always does my heart good to see people like him David Hopkins,
Mm-hmm.
what's John's name?
John Dunn. John Dunn?
Yes, yeah. Right. It does my heart good to see people like them who are out of our field end up in major leadership roles in universities. So
Yes.
Tim did a good job of that as well. I think this is right. Craig Risberg gave the acceptance talk. You know, each time when there's a group admitted to the academy, then one of them is chosen to give the acceptance talk or the response to the induction. And I think that was Craig that did that. I've not done a lot of work with Craig. I know him. One of his former students has been a colleague of mine at North Texas, Scott Martin, for 20 years. Again, I think those are people on that list who have, while I haven't worked specifically with all of them, I'm familiar with their work enough to be able to know that it's an honor to have inducted at the same time those people are. And along those lines, the thing that impresses me most when I go to the induction ceremonies each time is when they read the list of accomplishments of those people. Like, I don't know if I could get in anymore, but, you know, it's nice to see influencing the world. So that's a very heartwarming experience during the induction ceremony.
It's actually I think you're right. It's actually my favorite moment of the conference each year, and you're also right. It's so impressive to see the quality work that people have done. It's quite a select group, that's for sure. Interestingly enough, you know, I think Tim White and John Dunn, if I'm not mistaken, were at Oregon State University at the same time.
I know Tim, John. I didn't remember Tim being there.
Tim was there. I believe Tim. I believe I'm right about this. Is that he was at one time a dean at Oregon State, and I know that because Anthony Wilcox, who's a good friend of mine, Tony was the department chair.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. At Oregon State for a while, and I believe I think Tony was brought to Oregon State by Mike Maxid, who was the longtime dean at Oregon State.
I remember him too, yeah.
Yeah. So, very good. Maybe you've asked this or answered the next question, Jim, but I'll ask it anyway. What early leaders in the field most influenced your career? And can you provide any anecdotes and stories about those individuals? You know, I know you mentioned Dale Mood, for example, and Jane Glass, but are there other folks in kinesiology that influenced your career?
Yeah, I'll tell you one who influenced my career to begin with, who wouldn't be termed to be in kinesiology, and that would be, why did I get into this field to start with? I was a pretty good basketball player on a not very good basketball team when I was in high school. Good enough to make all-city in Tampa, alternate all-conference and things like that. I probably couldn't hold a candle to kids today. But the gentleman who was our coach was just, I wanted to be like him. I said, hey, he was just a fine man, I think. Unfortunately, he died just as he turned age 30.
Wow,
and,
wow.
I'm real big on telling people, hey, don't forget to let the people know who influenced your life. Thank you for what they did. And I always felt bad that I couldn't do that for Coach Gerald, because he died. I graduated high school in 1965, and I believe he died in the spring of 1967.
Wow,
and
wow.
Never had the chance to tell him, thanks, Coach, and hey, here's where I am, and where I'm at today is because I wanted to be like you. And it wasn't until this January I had the opportunity to do that. My brother, who's a year younger than I am, his basketball team got together for a reunion, so they invited me to come join them. So I went, and Gerald's wife was there.
Oh.
I had her since I was at his funeral, and I had the opportunity to tell her, Mrs. Gerald's, let me tell you what Coach did for me. And that was a very, very moving experience for me, because I never had the chance to tell him thanks. I tell Dr. Howell thanks. I tell Dr. Mood, Dale all the time. I saw Gene Glass about a year and a half ago. Hopkins, I don't have as much contact with anymore, but I tell people, don't forget to let people know who influenced your life. Thanks for what they've done for you. And I would say thank you to those people. Now, let's go on to something else particularly. A person in particular, T.K. Cureton. I didn't even know who T.K. Cureton was other than by name. And I went to see him talk. It's when I was in the Air Force, and he was speaking at the University of Denver. So a friend of mine went up to see him speak at the University of Denver. It was an amazing experience. But I know Kirk, his son, very well now.
Right, right.
I've told Kirk that story a number of times. It was just TK was up in this big auditorium and lecturing. It was a full auditorium, and he was lecturing. And I don't have any idea what the lecture was about nowadays. But the catch was, you'll remember, he was in the front of that room, and he threw his hands down on the floor, threw his feet up on the blackboard, and continued talking to us while he was doing handstands. And I'm going, oh, this is all right. There was a tiered seating area. He ran up and down there as he talked and did things like that. So I always thought, T.K. Cureton, I'd like to meet him. So I went to my first ACSM meeting in 1979 in Honolulu. And I'm walking through the hotel lobby, and I see T.K. sitting by himself in the hotel lobby. And here, I'm just a new buck just out. I don't know anything. But I thought, I need to say hello to this man. So I sat down and talked with him. And it's one of my very rewarding experiences as a young professional, sitting down and talking to T.K. Cureton. Have no idea what we talked about. Don't know. When I gave my first presentation, my first oral presentation, it was at AFERD in 1968 in Kansas City. I know that. I gave my talk, and then they said, are there any questions? And out there in the audience are two people. TK and Kirk are sitting next to each other. And all I could think about was, oh, I don't want TK to ask me a question because I don't know the answer. He did not. Kirk asked me my first question. I've told that story to Kirk many times. TK and what he's done for our profession is just wonderful, I think. One last experience returns back to my undergraduate experience when I was an undergraduate student at West Florida. My advisor, Dr. Howe, who I mentioned earlier, she took us to our first AFERD regional meeting. We went to Southern District AFERD in New Orleans. Now, the New Orleans was an attraction to us young guys at the time. We all went to New Orleans. That would have been in the spring of 1968. Great experience. And for years, I kept the program. I'm a pack rat. I kept the program from that meeting. There were many good experiences I learned there. And as a result of that, like AFERD or ACSM or NAK, I seldom missed those meetings once I got done with school and in the profession because of the things that she led us into doing. So she carried students each year while we were there to professional meetings. So again,
terrific.
Tying people together, I think, is important.
Absolutely. Jim, what next question? What do you believe were the major turning points in kinesiology? Good things that have happened, not so good things that have happened. What do you see as the major turning points in our field?
I think back to when I started and chose to be a, quote, then physical education major. There were basically two options. You were either a physical education teacher and or a coach. Maybe athletic training was involved then as well. I don't recall that much about it. But nowadays, wow, when you look at these surveys from freshmen when they come in to be kinesiology majors, overwhelmingly the most highest interest area they have is in physical therapy. And I have friends who teach physical therapy schools, and they say that their best students are coming out of kinesiology. They're not coming out of pre-med or biology. So the change in the career options that are now available to people in kinesiology are, I think, substantial compared to what they were 40 years ago. If you think along those same lines, the whole idea of the concept change, the name from physical education, which some people viewed pejoratively, but it's now kinesiology and exercise science and sports science, and there truly is a science to what we're doing. And that probably had a was greatly influenced by Franklin Henry's paper. Was that 1964?
1964, yes.
Physical education and academic discipline. That certainly had a great influence on what people did. In the measurement area itself, the concept of health-related fitness has dramatically changed how fitness is assessed in schools. The concept of the old presidential youth fitness test, which began in under Eisenhower administration with the development of the President's Council on Fitness, and then the move towards health-related fitness, the move away from performance standards that were norm reference to those that are now criterion reference. I think that's a dramatic change, and I was involved either as an observer or as a participant in many of those debates and arguments that went on in the 1980s, largely because of my association with Tony Jackson at Houston at the time. But just seeing all those arguments, I mean, people would get irate and holler at each other. And I remember Herb DeVries and T.K. Kjorton getting into an argument. I don't recall whether it was at AFERD or ACSM, but they were basically talking about how to assess fitness levels or VO2 max or something, and they'd be just screaming and hollering at each other. It was like, whoa, I don't want to be on a committee with them. But those kinds of a great influence as to where we are today. So.
Well, good, very, very good. Next question. And I think you've talked a little bit about this, but why did you choose to teach and conduct research in the measurement area? Was that an interest that really blossomed at the University of Colorado?
Yes, I actually when I went to Colorado, I originally expected that I was going to be a physiology major within what was then the physical education program, physiology. The coursework that you had to take at that point was through the medical school in Denver. Well, that was about 30 miles away or something. I thought, well, I don't know about that. Do I want to go down there? But as I began taking the introductory coursework in the doctoral program at Colorado, I ran into Hopkins and I ran into Glass. And I had a fairly good math background, and so I just fell in love with what they were doing. I mean, the concept of inferential statistics and measurement and testing. Dr. Howe, as an undergraduate, kind of had planted that seed, and perhaps it festered and grew a little bit while I was in the Air Force, because I did a lot of testing when I was in the Air Force. After I moved away from the OBGYN area, I worked in the flight surgeon's office. So I did stress testing, I did pulmonary function testing, so things that were, in defense of the Air Force, they should have put a physical education major in testing for fitness. That was a good idea.
Sure. Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
I learned a lot from those things, and that kept in my mind. And then when I got to Colorado and did well in these research classes, and I would visit with them, and then they invited me to become what we called a fellow in the Lab of Educational Research. And as a result of that, great experiences. We served as graduate students, we served as consultants to faculty and other graduate students who were conducting research projects. So it wasn't just in physical education or exercise science. I'd be working with somebody in secondary ed or in psychology or in business. And I could see the application of all these research methods to a wide variety of fields. And it was just fun.
Terrific. When I take, like other members of the National Academy of Kinesiology, Jim, you certainly have a long and really impressive publication list. And when I went through it, and I took a quick look at what you've written, I just wondered, are there any articles, any book chapters, any monographs that you're particularly proud of, that you think have been most influential within our field?
Well, that's a tough one. Every time I write a paper, I say, who cares about this? I do it. It's been fun doing this. I'm saying, how much true impact does this have on people? And it's not like I missed a name that I should have said earlier on when I was talking about people who influenced my life. When I came to North Texas, Steve Blair was at the Cooper Institute, and I was associated with Steve when I was the editor of Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport. And I think about the kinds of things that Steve has written, and I'm going, wow, these got, you know, thousands and thousands of citations to this work that they've done. Wow, has my work have any real influence on that? I don't know that it really does, compared to what others of our colleagues have done. If I think about the things that I'm, quote, most proud of, I remember that in subsequent to the release of the Surgeon General's report on physical activity and health in 1995 or 96, I forget now, we were funded to do some work and follow up on people knew about that research and how much they knew about physical activity assessment and the important role that physical activity plays on quality of life and health. And as a result of that, I got to present at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And that's kind of a highlight. I like the idea that, wow, what we're doing in physical activity is important enough that the National Press Club would host us via ACSM and talk about what's going on with the important role that physical activity plays in life. I think that our measurement text has been pretty well received. It's an undergraduate text. We wrote it in that fashion. I think in the back of our minds was the fact that, hey, we learned this stuff as an undergrad, and it turned us on. It turned us on to where we are today, and that's what we do for our life skills, and try to undergraduate students to say, hey, look, this is important and this is fun. It's not hard. You don't have to be a mathematical wizard to understand the concept of measurement and evaluation of research methodology. You have to be able to think logically and to solve problems, and I think it's a much more of a logical process than it is a mathematical process, at least from the perspective that I teach it. And so I hope that our textbook does that it influences people in a way that says, hey, this is interesting, it's fun to do, and I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life, just like whenever I was in Dr. Howe's class and we had Barrel and McGee. David, you're probably not old enough to remember that book. McGee was, I guess, the first measurement book published in the early 1960s, maybe middle 60s. I still have that book. Actually, I had Harold Barrow sign it for me. Whenever he received a Hetherington Award, I introduced him at AAKPE meeting whenever he received the Hetherington Award, and I got Harold to sign my copy of his book. He was an undergraduate. Well, I'd like people to say the same thing about our book. Say, hey, this book is easy to read, and it's influential. The last piece of all that would be, and this is one of the things I think that's changed a great deal. There's a lot less interest, a lot less direction, focus on fitness testing nowadays. We're focused on physical activity assessment, getting people to be active. And I think we've done a number of papers, some of those that came out of the Cooper Institute and work we've done there, that talks about the important role that physical activity plays, and looking at measurement aspects of that with regard to, you know, the kinds of things that people assess, the importance of sedentary behaviors, the importance of moderate to vigorous physical activity, the things that resulted from the Surgeon General's report. I have a slide that I've often used that shows the number of NIH awards and the number of publications that appear in PubMed prior to, and then in 1995, and in 2008 with the release of the physical activity guidelines for Americans. And you see that the amount of money that's spent in our field now to study physical activity, the number of publications that appear, it's amazing the influence that our community can have.
Absolutely. Jim, just a couple more questions. Very good. What is your hope for kinesiology in the future? What in some ways, what direction to see it go?
Number one, I'd like more people to know what kinesiology is. People ask me, oh, you're retired, yeah, what did you do? I said, I taught in the kinesiology program. This glassy look that comes over their eyes. He has a PhD in physics. He says, oh, you're a physical education teacher. I said, yeah, that's what I wanted to do, but that's not what I ended up doing. I think that the influence that we have in kinesiology, or can have in kinesiology, is very important. I don't know that we need to do a lot more studies now on, hey, does physical activity work for us? Yes, it does. We know there's a relationship between physical activity and a myriad of outcomes, of health outcomes. We don't know is how do we get people to be physically active, to adopt those behaviors, and maintain them throughout life. It's just,
Right.
The sports psychology people and the sociology people can have a great influence on what we've done in the past and what we've learned in the past and what they can do in the future. We know it works. How do we get people to adopt it? That's an important thing, I think. Another big influence that I've seen change is, you know, the whole concept of computer technology. I remember taking my first computer class and having key punch cards and getting programs in Fortran and in BASIC, and it's like now the two computers I'm sitting here at my desk looking at are more powerful than they could have ever imagined 30 years ago. And the things there, it's just, I think that's amazing. I'm a little bit concerned about, and I've been part of the problem, not part of the solution, this whole idea of distance learning.
Right.
I flipped my class. I had my class where I have now well over 100 online video lectures. You can go to YouTube and find my lectures, and you can watch a lecture on this. And what I would do is have them come into class and we talk about things and work on projects. But there's something to be gained by being in the classroom face-to-face with an instructor. You know, I was face-to-face with Pat Howe and Dale Mood and Gene Glass and Ken Hopkins, and those people influenced my life. And if the only relationship I have with my students is what I have online, I'm scared about that a bit.
Right.
And
right.
I'm a computer guy. I'm as nerdy as the next guy, and it's fun making these videos and doing all those things. But the personal interaction that we have with individuals, you know, I neglected here anywhere. I haven't said anything about the students. I had wonderful students. Right? I'm as proud of my academic offspring, almost as proud of them as I am of my own biological offspring. They've done wonderful things. They hold endowed chairs. They're leaders in the country in what we do in assessment of physical activity. I'm very proud and pleased with what they've done. But I don't think that could ever occurred if the only experience they had was being online to take a class. And there's this whole movement towards, all right, don't come to class, just do it all online. I'm skeptical of that, and I've been part of it because I've done it with the flipping of my classes. But I just I don't know how good it can be.
You know, I certainly share some of the same concerns. You know, I think with what I see as a kind of the new business model for the university. You know, we certainly here at George Mason have seen an increasing number of distance education courses, online courses, and I'm with you. I have yet to teach one. All of my classes are face-to-face, and that to me is the real joy about teaching, is actually sitting in the classroom with my students and having a dialogue and a discussion, and that's I share your skepticism, that's for sure, Jim.
You know, when looking at a student in class and the light comes on and you're engaging with them either, you know, in a comical way or in a teaching way or a learning way for them, I always tell my students, I want to learn more from you than you learn from me.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
That when that happens in class, you walk back to your office and you go, that was good. I like that.
I agree with you.
I have. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm done. Go ahead.
You know, one last question, Jim, that I have, and I did not send this question to you beforehand, but you know, you have been selected to receive the Hetherington Award. As you well know, the Hetherington Award is really the highest honor that can be given someone in the National Academy of Kinesiology. I'm curious, and you don't have to give the entire story away, but You know, the Hetherington Award winners are always asked to say a few words after being given the award. What what do you plan, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about this? What do you plan to say? Um, who who do you plan to thank? Um, what what kind of words are you going to use to in when you receive such a prestigious honor?
Well, first thing, and I have begun to think about that, David. I haven't put my slides together yet, and I don't know how many slides to do. I asked my wife the other day. I said, "Hon, maybe I should talk without slides." She said, "Yeah, you better." Um, the people I've mentioned before. I mean, when I would start with, well, a piece of my story I didn't tell you. I was born and raised in a place that many people have heard about, but most people don't think really exists. I was born and raised in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania.
Oh, interesting.
And my brother and sister and I, we were we were students in the lab school at Slippery Rock. And so our school was on the campus of Slippery Rock University. And I recall many experiences there because in those days, this is in the 1950s now, Slippery Rock was best known for being a physical education school. And we would have student teachers come, many student teachers come in. I was there through, I guess, through the 4th grade in Slippery Rock. My sister went there through junior in high school, so we were there a good while. But it was those kinds of experiences. I saw teachers. Hey, I want to be a teacher. That sounds like a good thing to be. So I would go clear back to there, and I have to mention my parents, and I'm not going to give you my whole talk, David, but they were farmers. They were not educated people, but they instilled in me two things which I think I've carried throughout my life, and that's a work ethic. I'm not afraid to work. And I look at my brother, who's a year younger than I am. The boy is not afraid to work. And we're people of faith, right? We've just been that all of our lives, and my parents instilled that in us, and I appreciate that. I'd run through them, Dr. Howe at West Florida, and Dale Mood, and Gene Glass, and Ken Hopkins, Ken Gerald's the basketball coach. I'll tell those stories, and I do this thing. The first day of class, I introduce myself and tell the people who I am and how I'm there to help them. I'm different than many of the people you might encounter in a university setting, but I want you to be successful. And if you need help, come see me. And I think the idea of mentoring that those people provided to me, I try to instill that in my undergraduate students and say, look, if you need help, come see me. That's what I want to be here for. And then the last day of class, I tell them, okay, this is the last time you're going to get to see me. And I'm going to tell you what's important in life. Don't forget to thank the people. And I'll thank those people, the people who nominated me for the Academy. I'm not sure who nominated me for the Hetherington Award. I think I know who that was, but I've been trying to find it. I do not know for certain. But the people that you encounter in life, even in passing, you know, Lamar Hicks, I showed up at the Academy that day and he said, you need to be in school, Morrow. No, sir, I don't need to be in school. Yes, sir, you do. And it changed the rest of my life. And it doesn't take, and how just the most common little things you say to people influence them for the rest of their lives. So it'll be thanking people and saying, here's what's important. And when you're done with it, here's where you go.
Yep.
So that's I've got some photos and stuff, but I literally have not begun to put any slides together, because that's one thing I wanted to ask Kim and Amy. Hey, how much time do you want me to have? I don't want to give you an hour lecture here, but the knowledge guided my career.
Well, very good, Jim. And I couldn't agree with you more about thanking the folks that were so influential in one's life and career. That's for sure. Anything else, Jim, that you'd like to mention before we come to a close? And anything at all?
I'm looking back across my little notes that I scribbled across different pages here, and I literally believe I covered everything on here. The one thing that I think might be important in kinesiology that we haven't done yet is this whole concept, and Brad Cardinal of Oregon State has written on this, and so has Arizona State, Chuck Corbin. The concept of required physical education. You know, when I was an undergraduate student, I didn't have many physical activity classes. I mean, ours was, quote, a more science-based program. My student taught with a guy, he was from Florida State, and they had to have 27, as I recall, 27 different physical activity experiences for which they received like no credit. They had to either competency-based or whatever it was they had to go through. And I think providing experiences like that at the undergraduate level is essential. When I went to North Texas, we had a physical activity requirement that was 4 credit hours, and then it went down to 2, then it went back up to 3. Now there's no requirement for people who are engaged, enrolled in undergraduate education for physical activity experiences. Now, the university says, oh, well, we don't have time and room for that, and they get it through the rec center or they get it through intramurals, which is true.
Right.
They can get it there.
Right.
Concept of learning about, I'll call it basic epidemiology of physical activity, and, hey, engage in some things that you might want to do for the rest of your life. Okay?
Sure.
I hope we don't get so scientifically based that we forget that concept, that we shouldn't have some physical activity experiences throughout the undergraduate experience. Well, the barn may be shut, the door may be shut there. We don't have the opportunity anymore. But I think we hurt people by not providing them with those kinds of experiences.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. That's for sure. Jim, let's close on that. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you. And first of all, congratulations on retirement, but also congratulations on receiving the Hetherington Award. And I plan to be at the banquet and see you get that honor.
You don't have to go now, David. You got everything I'm going to
say. No, I want to be there. Actually, there are a couple of folks that I was part of the nomination teams for a couple of the new fellows. So, I need to be there for that. But I also want to be there when you get the award. That's for sure.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and we'll look forward to visiting with you there.
I will see you in Albuquerque, and thanks again, Jim.
Okay, thank you, David. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.